Welcome to the Brute Facts Podcast with your host and everybody's favorite Christian, Eddie Kroom. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell for future content.
Welcome to Brute Facts. We are on location in Louisiana. I am at a very nice casino. I don't know how I pulled that off. And I was hoping to have a lot better backdrop and good looking everything, but life happens. Had a emergency call at the last minute with work, and customers unfortunately want you to fix their things when they pay for it. That's the way it goes. Dr. Ryan Mullins is with us. He is, I am so thankful and grateful for as patient as he's been. And he's just been hanging out and saying, no, man, you're the coolest guy I ever met. So, yeah, I'm going to come on. But no, Dr. Ryan Mullins, he has a PhD in philosophical theology from the University of St. Andrews, Masters of Philosophy, BS in Humanities. I love his work. I love the what he did with God and Time. It is a fantastic presentation that he does, and ultimately wrote a book on it. So I've got his links in the bottom for his page, for his books. If you haven't seen his work, you've got to check it out. It is fantastic. I'm gonna go ahead and bring on Dr. Mullins. How are you doing, Dr. Mullins?
Doing all right.
Sweet. I got to say, the first time that I'd seen you a lot and read a lot of your work, and when I heard you talk, I was like, man, he's got a radio voice. Why is he? You looked really young, and I was like, that's a man right there. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Were you always a Christian? Did you become a Christian? How does all that work with you?
I have the most dramatic testimony of like how I converted to Christianity you've probably ever heard. So buckle up for this.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up in a Christian household. And then at the age of 9, I was just thinking, yeah, this Jesus stuff, that makes sense. Dad, can I get baptized? My dad's like, sure. There we go. Let's get baptized. And there we go. End of story. Yeah. Most dramatic conversion story you've ever heard in your life.
That is fantastic. Mm-hmm. I tried that. We went to one of the neighborhood revival nights, and I was young, and they did the altar call, and I'm, a young kid and in tears, and I'm starting to head up there, and my dad's like, sit down. I was like, I want to get saved. He looked at me and said, sit down. And I was like, okay. I found out later it was because I was so young. He didn't think I was ready for that. So
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. So what got you into wanting to do philosophy of religion?
So I went to a Christian high school, and we were reading C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. And that was the first time in my life where I felt like I was actually kind of thinking about the nature of God. And I found it really fascinating. And there was a chapter on God and time in Mere Christianity that really grabbed my attention. And so I just wanted to know more about that. But then when I eventually ended up going to university for theology and philosophy, that took a while before I did that, because originally I was going to go into television and radio and then film school. Then somehow got addicted to theology and philosophy instead. I was going to do just like biblical studies and history, because I just thought I want to do church history. But then a lot of the questions that historical figures like St. Augustine and others were asking, they're deep, like philosophical questions. And so I was like, I have to do the philosophy in order to really understand the answers that Augustine's giving, and then also the answers that I want to figure out myself. So I just kind of got addicted from there. It was just by sitting down and just reading a bunch of historical figures and then going, I have to know more. Am I really satisfied with the answers they're giving? I don't know. I need to think about it more.
I just almost died.
Well,
I was drinking some water, and I think I breathed it in instead of actually swallowed. This is just not, man.
Not your day. It's just not your day.
It's not my day. It's not my week. I'm not used to having to work for my money. And this week they are making me work for my money. That is for sure. So I heard you tell that story before about being interested in high school. Mm-hmm. And I forgot who you were talking to about it. It was a YouTube video, and is it analytical
Oh, it might be the
Christian?
Analytic Christian, Jordan show.
Yeah, and he said, "That's not what I was thinking about in high school," and that's exactly what I thought. I was like, "That's not what I was thinking about in high school." But C.S. Lewis, great choice.
Mhm.
So, tell me a little bit more about how, in this venture, you stumbled across this God and time concept that, like you had stated, was not one that's really been tackled a whole lot.
No, it wasn't. And when I was originally in university, like I said, I was originally studying like films. I was going to go to film school, so I was studying like communications. But I was working at a bookstore, and I just really wanted to know more about all the time stuff. So I bought a copy of Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, and then I found William Lane Craig's Time and Eternity. I didn't know who William Lane Craig was at that point. I didn't know any of this sort of stuff. I wasn't really introduced to apologetics yet. But I was just like, okay, well, so here's some time stuff. There we go. And so I was just reading through those things. I just became really fascinated, but didn't understand any of it. I had no idea what I was getting into. And then eventually, when I switched to a university where I was doing a lot of theology and philosophy, I wanted to do an undergraduate dissertation. And originally, I was going to do it on God and time. And I started reading some more philosophy of time literature, and I was like, I do not understand any of this. I can't do this. So I had to pick a different topic. And then when I got to my master's, I was really dedicated to, I really want to try to tackle this during my master's degree.
That's pretty interesting. It was not to have heard of William Lane Craig.
Yeah. And then I eventually get to like this other university in Atlanta. It was a Christian university where I finished, and I was reading tons of William Lane Craig in my philosophy classes, and I was like, oh, I just got lucky and just happened to have like found like one of his books and just went from there.
He's so popular now that you hear a lot of things said about him, not good, and the man really is brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
When not too many people in the apologetic circles or online and things really get into his academic work, but his academic work is phenomenal, especially his philosophy of time. So,
I mean, that was one of the things that really impressed me, because I've been in several settings where I'll be around a bunch of professional philosophers, and they'll just try to dismiss him as like, oh, he's just an apologist, he's just doing this or that. And I'm like, have you read his work on the philosophy of time? I mean, that is at that point in history, like it was really cutting edge stuff, and people were quoting those things and had no idea that he even did philosophy of religion. They were just going like, oh, his book on the tenseless theory and the tense theory, these are great. They didn't even know he did any God stuff, because that's how good it was. It was just good on its own merit.
Yeah, he's in his academic stuff. If you're not used to academic stuff, all these people who think that he's just an apologist, it's a hard read. It's for me, it takes of course, I'm pretty ADHD, so sometimes I have to read things over and over again. But yeah, it's definitely an area that I'm interested in myself for sure. I haven't spent too much time there, but I see that you have another book in the works also. Tell us a little bit about that one.
I've actually got two books I'm working on. So one is called The Divine Time Maker, and so it's the big project. And then the next one after that is called Eternal in Love. It's a little book about a big God. So it's going to be kind of a concise, more popular level statement of everything I've been working on over the years, of just where I'm at the moment, of what I think about the nature of God. So the Time Maker project, though, that's the really big one. So say you want to reject divine timelessness, like I do. What are you left with? What are your options? You want to say God's in time or temporal. What does that mean? What does that look like? I don't know. Most people don't even tell you what time is. Now you're going to tell me what to talk about, like divine temporality. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'll tell you what time is. First, I'll do that. It's better than anyone else has done. And then I'll look at a bunch of different models of God that think God's temporal, and try to work out all sorts of different problems that all these views are going to face, so you really understand your options. So by the time you've finished the book, you will go, if I commit myself to divine temporality, here are all my options. Which one do I want to take? That's the hope.
Yeah, because I was real sympathetic to Craig's position, God entering into time temporally, because it seems to be almost intuitive that there would have to be some kind of temporal relationship at least. And like you had stated several times, a couple of places, I mean, when we talk about a timeless God, it seems incoherent. It doesn't really comport to reality with me, and just seems like a hard concept. So
yeah, and so I'm going to be looking at. I've got a whole section on Craig's view where I'm trying to actually like critique it and go, this doesn't really work either. This whole idea of God being timeless without the universe and then temporal with, that's just really weird, and it causes some problems. And then the underlying theory of time that he has there, I want to go, that's got some serious problems. And then try to go, well, here are some other options if you don't like that. So it's some of the stuff I'm up to.
Yeah, and I also noticed you'd written God in Emotion. That's actually was on my list for the next one. I didn't get the End of a Timeless God, because it would be End of a Finite Husband. I tried and I didn't realize it was a textbook, pretty much. So, and it's a textbook price. So
yeah. That's why I was really committed to doing this, the little book about a big God that I mentioned, because it's going to be with a publisher that's an academic publisher, but they're going to sell it for like $20. And so that way people who cannot afford the End of the Timeless God, because it's outrageous. And I get like $1 for every copy that's sold. I think that's it.
That's what aggravates me with, and I'm all for intellectual property, but when we get to a certain level, I understand there's a give and take. You get published, you don't make any money, or you make very little money. And I actually wouldn't mind paying a lot more for like textbooks and things like that. But I know, as long as I've been around, that when I pay for academic papers or things like that, I would offer the philosopher or the historian, whoever it is, behind scenes, like, hey, I'd rather you get the money and they come here than them get the money. You know? So speaking on that, what do you think about the file sharing sites that do all the academic? That's something I wanted to ask a lot of academics to see how they really felt about that. What is your take without getting you in trouble?
I feel like if anybody's upset, I don't. Okay. It seems to me that the most academics, most philosophers I know, and most theologians I know, they use those sites. They get books from those sites because they can't find a copy anywhere, especially during the pandemic when all the libraries are closed. You just find a really seedy Russian site that's gonna download these books that you need. Okay, well there you go. Everybody's using it, so I don't know if you complain. Then it's kind of hard to complain too much.
Right, and I was just told about the site where you can actually download full books, and I was like, "No way! Let's see if the End of a Timeless God is there," and it wasn't. So, but I'm a book person. Even though I have to make myself read, I want the book. I don't like digital copies. I spend so much time on a screen. I don't like reading on this.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. Like, I've amassed a huge digital library, which is good because I have to move like every year for like trying to keep up with academic jobs. So moving a library across the ocean is really hard, but I just much prefer having a physical copy.
Yeah, I mean, I do for that very same reason. I do a lot of travel for work, hence where I'm at now. And when I do the travel, Kindle is very nice and Audible is very nice. Now, I do a lot of Audible books because I'm an audio-visual learner, and I had to get the unlimited or the paid subscription for YouTube. So I love that because I spend a lot of time, in the car. And you've done a lot of things on there. You've been quite around. You can just put you in. You're like a superstar.
This was kind of my wife pointed this out to me. She was like, "How many have you done?" And we counted up, and I think I did. I think it was over like 40 or 50 interviews just this last year. So that's like including like some podcasts that are not on YouTube and stuff. But it was like 40 or 50 different interviews I had done for like all sorts of shows, and I didn't realize that because at some point, like I was just kind of bored, and so people would be like, "Yeah, you want to do it?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And so I was just doing like a couple every week at various points.
Well, I'm glad you were bored enough to come on here. That's no, just it's we'll get there. It's actually grown pretty fast. I've been surprised about it, and I've had so much positive feedback by the guests being able to talk about other things in their work all the time. And that's what I want to know, because I didn't get to grow up in the academic area. I didn't get to.
Mhm.
I am enrolled and plan on pursuing, but I didn't. Where I came from, I didn't have the chance to do it. So I'm like really intrigued by those who are so young and getting in philosophy of religion. I think
Mhm.
it's fantastic. There is one thing I wanted to ask you about. I have this discussion a lot with lay. I'm a layperson, and I have to chop it up until it gets to a point where I can understand it, on a lay level. And so I tend to be, some people say I'm good at relaying it to lay people. So I've tried to get them to understand just how powerful intuition is in philosophy. And people want to always kind of go back to a feeling. What would be the best way to explain? Because I saw that talking with Stephen Namesh and a couple of other guys on the analytic uh, Christian about, there's a strong intuition there. So obviously we need a good argument or defeater, for that intuition. How would you explain the power of intuition?
I feel like the best way to explain it would just be to ask people to reflect on their own experience, because intuitions are where we start with everything. Like the number of times people say, well, it seems to me, or I feel like, those are just natural English phrases that we use all the time. And every single instance of that, well, that's an intuition. They're intuitions that have been shaped by your culture, shaped by your past experiences, by your upbringing, by your education, all sorts of factors. But that is where your starting point is. It's always your starting point for your investigations. Is like, well, that just doesn't seem right. So I'm going to look a little bit deeper. Or, that sounds good. And you're satisfied. So you don't look into it anymore because it does sound right to you. Those are just, so I think just intuitions, they just are the starting point for pretty much all of your rational inquiry.
And that's kind of how I've tried to explain it, that, if something seems to be the case, not really the phenomenal conservatism route, but if something really seems to be the case and it's intuitional, you have a kind of a default, position or prima facie on the face of it, it seems this way, then there needs to be something to tell you that that's wrong, or there's a better way to look at it. If not, I would go as far as to say you're justified in that intuition without defeaters or arguments, if there's not a defeater or a better argument.
Yeah, that seems right to me, but I also don't do that much epistemology anymore. So I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I'll leave that to like Tyler McNabb or one of those people. Be like, you tell me what the epistemology is, and then I'll just copy your homework. That's what I would do with Tyler.
Yeah, I had him on here. I like Tyler. I've been talking with him for years. He's a fantastic guy.
He's a great guy. Yeah,
you can get him rattled easy too.
For the first time I met Tyler was in Glasgow, and we went to Five Guys because I was like I need a burger, and they've finally opened a Five Guys in Scotland, and so went over to Glasgow and met him, and that way we just went straight for a burger. He's like, I know you love cheeseburgers, so here we go, let's do this. So he's a man after my own heart.
That's well, it was funny. It just so happened that I had Dr. Liz Jackson and then Tyler McNabb, and I was trying to stir something up there on each of the shows. One being, probabilist or Bayesian, and the other one being proper functionalist. And I tried to get her to say something, and she wouldn't, and he didn't really say much. I'm like, come on, man, y'all got to.
Yeah, you want to see them fight, but they're both so nice. Like, they're such nice people, and
Right.
Yeah. Ah, well, too bad. Whereas, we're like Stephen and I, we were happy to, like, Stephen and Mesh and I were happy to we're like, yeah, we'll debate. Let's go for it. It'll be fun.
Yeah, I like now Dr. Namesh. He was on my show early on, and he went over some seemed a bit abstract Romanian theology, but after I did go back and listen to it a couple of times, I was like, that's pretty cool. So
he's going to do an interesting project. I'm in the middle of editing an interview that I did with him for my show about his dissertation. And as I was listening back, I was like, he actually explains like this continental phenomenology stuff in a way that you can actually understand. That's impressive because normally that stuff's just nonsense. And he's like,
yes.
He actually makes things. I'm like, those are statements that are true or false. Good job. Like, it's clear. I can follow this.
He absolutely does have that gift. And now that you think about it, it's such a gift that I didn't even really think about continental philosophy. That is, and me being extremely analytical myself, analytic philosophy was just kind of like my natural thing. And anytime I get anywhere near continental, I'm just like, I just don't get it. I don't,
Yeah. I always get impressed when people ask me like, oh, you do philosophy? I'm like, yeah. And they ask kind of like what kind, and I'm trying to explain it. And then every once in a while people ask like, but like, what about Hegel? And I'm like, oh gosh. And they're like, oh, okay, good. Cause I didn't know if I was stupid that I didn't understand Hegel. And I'm like, no, that's fine. You don't need to worry about that.
That's fantastic, because when we were talking about continental, my mind immediately went to Hegelian. And I have, I'm sure you probably know Ben Watkins.
Yes.
Yeah, relay theology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, he has gone from Hume to Kant to Hegel. And
I remember seeing this on Twitter. He was like really big on Hegel, and I'm like, that's where you want to go, bro, I guess, for it.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know whether that's a good thing or not, because it's Hegel. It just but speaking of Dr. McNabb, he's actually done in epistemology kind of like Swinburne's got epistemic justification, and they're actually kind of bridging that gap between internalism and externalism as far as justification and warrant, and so I'm definitely interested to see where that goes, because I'm tired of seeing Dr. McGrew argue with proper functionalists. I like all of them, but yeah. So what about the God in Emotion book?
Mm-hmm.
What is
go for it. Yeah,
what is that one? What is the overall goal for that one?
Well, okay, so there's the goal that's in the book, and then there was like the personal goal behind it. So the personal goal behind it was I just wanted to understand my own emotions. Just like, what are they? How do I get connected with my emotions? And then how do I get connected to God? Because I had gone through a bit of a spiritual crisis at one point. And so it was a very existential sort of thing for me to try to figure out just who is this God that I'm worshiping, and how do I get connected to this God? The book itself, though, is to go, if God exists, what would God's emotional life be like? The traditional view is that God pretty much just has one emotion, and that's just pure, undisturbed happiness. And nothing could possibly disturb God's happiness in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, nothing can influence God in any way at all. It turns out that's the classical view. And because of that, God has no empathy and no compassion. The more contemporary view is that God actually does have a wide range of emotions. God can be influenced by you. God has whichever emotions are rational and morally appropriate to have at any given point, but God can be influenced by you. So if you do something really awful, God's going to have an emotion like, ugh, yeah, you suck, Eddie. What's wrong with you? And then if you repent of that, yeah, exactly. Eddie's like, that Eddie guy. Whereas if you repent, then God's going to have like some kind of delight. He's going to be happy. He's going to rejoice that you've repented. So that was kind of some of the stuff I was looking at, was a bunch of questions around that of which one is right. And it got into some really fun stuff about the nature of love and wrath, like what does it mean for God to have wrath? And then the most fun chapter is the last one, where I look at what I call the problem of creepy emotions. So there's something called the horny God objection. So like, if God really does empathize with everything that you feel, well, what about everything that you feel? Like, do you really want God empathizing with all that sort of stuff? And it gets kind of weird, gets kind of creepy. And so that was fun to just really dig deep into that and just go, I'll write a whole chapter on this. Nobody's done that. I'll do it.
Yeah. So we're about to get weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go for it.
Because anytime somebody talks about God and intimacy or eroticism or anything like that, I go back to this pastor that I had heard. And I'm glad I'm talking to you about this because I had my friend Oz on here and it went off the rails. But he said, to kind of be shocking, he said every single married couple should be a threesome. And you should have seen the crowd. Everybody's like, huh, what? And he's like, God should be involved in that bedroom with you. It should be your wife and you joined together with God. And I'm like, I don't know if I agree or disagree, but I don't need that mental image. It's like, I get the deep spiritual understanding of that, but just the way that he was just so shocking with it. It's like there should always be a threesome with God, and I'm like, okay, yeah, baby, you ready for no? Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Yeah. So I noticed you are a heavy metal guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Are you since you're a modified classical theist, are you a modified classical metal guy? Do you like the newer hard death metal, speed metal, or?
I do listen to a lot of death metal and a lot of black metal. There's a lot of metalcore and deathcore that I've been listening to. So yeah, so I'm wearing a Black Dahlia Murder shirt at the moment. That's one of my favorite bands. They're from Detroit. I've seen them a fair number of times in the U.S. and then I saw them in Scotland a few times as well.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm a bit older than you, so I'm like a Metallica guy.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite band is probably Metallica. I'm from the Slayer days and Pantera. And, yeah, so the granddaddies of them.
No, yeah, like the last tour that Slayer was on. My wife and I we had to get tickets in Glasgow to go see them. That was a brilliant show. Oh my gosh, like the amount of fire that was just like just all over the place as they're playing like that would have like the budget for the fire alone. I mean that had to be thousands of dollars like or something. It was outrageous. It was really cool.
We had the first real concert, like not at the fairgrounds concert. The real concert I went to was a Metallica concert, and not being the concert aficionado, I didn't realize that when the band leaves, they come back.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So I'm like, let's go. Traffic's going to be terrible. Let's get out of here. And not to mention, it was like a 20-minute show after we left. But what I missed was the pyrotechnics. They had a figure 8 stage, and a guy had fallen from the rail above onto one of the pyrotechnics as the flames were coming out, and everybody assumed it was part of the show. This guy just hit these flames and went up in flames, and they, he's like running. Just, I think because he like jetted to the back, people thought it was part of the show, but it was like he didn't know what to do.
Yeah,
and
because I don't know if I just found myself on fire, I'd probably forget like, oh, stop, drop, and roll. Stop, drop, and what was it? I'm just running. I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
But isn't there a point where you have so many flames that rolling's just not going to do any good?
I don't know. I'd just be freaking out.
Yeah. And the show went on. As I'm going to my car and my head hung low, I could hear them jamming. And I was like, oh, what?
So at that point, it's too late. You've already you're committed to your car.
I'm already halfway to the car. I'm like, what an idiot. My wife, who was a girlfriend at the time, is just looking at me, with that foot tap. And I'm like, I'm sorry. We beat the traffic. I can tell you that. So are you a sports guy at all, or?
Oh gosh, no. Like so the what was it the Euros was recently. So like football or soccer, as we'll say in America, was happening, and it was Italy versus England. And so at that point, like my wife and I were still in Scotland. And the Scottish don't like the English, and she's Italian, so she's like, we have to vote for the Italians. We can't go with the English. And I was like, okay, fine. And she's like really into it. She just loves it. And I know a little bit of Italian. There was all sorts of Italian words that I heard at that while we were watching that I did not know existed. She was just like so into the game. As I'm just sitting there kind of like, I found a funny meme on my phone. I don't know. Like, I don't know. It just does nothing for me.
Yeah, that's my wife right there.
So she was disappointed because when you left, we left the show too early.
And she's Italian.
Mm-hmm.
And so just blink 3 times if you need help. It's usually only when the family comes over that things get, heated and really going. It's those Italian families, man. You don't know if they're arguing or getting along. It's just
yeah. That was my first experience in Italy because and I was like, I knew zero Italian at that point. And I was like, everybody's excited. I don't know what's happening.
All right, is our life in danger? Or should we be going somewhere? So, what are you drinking on?
So So I just moved to Philly, and so I'm trying to find out like just what's nearby. And the only place nearby was this hipster place, and so they were selling. Let me find this. What this is? It's called New Liberty Millstone. So it's a rye whiskey made right here in Philadelphia. So,
wow. Well, Philly's old, so you would think that.
Yeah.
They know how to make whiskey.
I would hope. I mean, I saw America's oldest street today.
Really?
So yeah, that's a thing apparently.
I didn't know that.
It's from like the 1700s, and I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I was stunned to know that the oldest city in America is actually in Florida. It's it's from I believe when the Spanish.
Oh, when the Spanish were colonizing, right?
Yeah, when they first came up. I am drinking Knob Creek, but I have to be careful because you can't. I don't know what the deal is, but I can't find normal, regular Knob Creek anymore. It's all this 100 proof stuff. Yeah, and I'm like not trying to go full 100 proof.
Right. Yeah.
Oh man. So you're not into sports. You have an Italian wife. You like philosophy of religion. You're just an enigma. It's you're just something different, man. You look really young, but you sound like a radio voice.
Yeah, and I'm not that young anymore, though, unfortunately. But I still look it, so I'm like, okay, go for it.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, if you have a PhD, you're not too young. That's
I just turned 38.
Last week? You're not far behind me.
Yeah. Okay.
Man, you look fantastic.
It's a healthy diet of McDonald's and Wendy's. That's the main thing is a lot of cheeseburgers. It keeps you young.
St. Augustine. There you go. Thank you, Amber. I knew it was.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
right.
Saint something.
I think my dad had told me that. Yeah.
Yeah. Why is the McDonald's diet working great for you and not so much for me?
I don't know. So it might be because I've been living abroad for so long, and just whatever they're putting in the food is not good anywhere. Of course, like it's McDonald's, but that doesn't prevent me from eating it all the time. But whatever they're putting in the UK, like it's less fatty, but it also has less taste because the UK.
Yeah,
all the food in the UK has no taste whatsoever. It's just very
not real food.
No.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing that just reminds you that this is a place that it was at one point in time, it was a great empire, but those days are no more. Yeah. Like that, and I think that's why everything's so bland. It's just like, yeah, we're nothing now.
Well, I think you hit on a very important point when you were talking about the blandness of the food, because I've been to Costa Rica several times, and not the good parts. And even in Calgary, Canada, Alberta, the one thing that I noticed was the menus are extremely small compared to what we have here. Both places, the food is very bland in Costa Rica. The native food there, it's pretty much beans and rice, and then if you can get chicken, beans, chicken, and rice, and they don't use a lot of flavor. I know now why they use so much spices on their stuff.
Right.
It has to be hot because it all tastes the same all the time.
Right. Otherwise,
it's terrible, really. Yeah, I went to a Kentucky Fried Chicken in Costa Rica, and it was horrible. The chicken was crispy chicken, and it didn't. I don't know what they used. It wasn't crispy chicken.
So it looked like KFC, but just didn't taste like it.
Yes.
That's disappointing.
They had coleslaw they just called salad, and it was like real cold water on the coleslaw. And I'm like, bro, this is terrible, man. Terrible. So we hit the rest of the American chains while we were there, because it's like, well, Denny's, hey, you can't mess that up. And they didn't disappoint.
Okay, well, that's good.
As it is in the U.S. So oh, we're going to hell. So your position of modified or neo-classical theism, the issues you have with divine simplicity, I want to lean on divine simplicity for a lot of things, but I have the same kind of concerns that you do. And so what exactly would you say is the biggest differences between your views and classical theism?
The first big difference would be, okay, I'll mention two. The first one is my view is coherent and classical theism is incoherent. The second would be that classical theism is anti-biblical because it says things that the Bible completely contradicts, whereas my view is it got some kind of biblical warrant. Maybe not for every single detail of it, but it's got some. So those would be the big two differences. I've stated those in intentionally like inflammatory ways, but yeah.
That's see, I'm with you. I just don't think. Now I love what Dr. Namesh has done with this new semantic content. You know, I think it's kind of innovative, but it seems like you can't get away from necessitarianism, modal collapse, no matter how hard you try. What I like about divine simplicity is, you know, the problem of evil, the immanence of a simple being. You know, we can talk about just the goodness of just emanating, and it's not a part of God. It's just the immanence of being. So there's a lot of things into, like with Aquinas' view, that I'm very sympathetic with divine simplicity. But with you, I just can't find a way to get away from the modal collapse or necessitarianism.
Yeah, no, I understand that feeling because I had the same for many years. It took me a long time to give up simplicity and timelessness and I mean, all these sort of things. I don't think I was ever really committed to impassibility because I just never understood that. And I had read my Bible, so I just knew that was false. But simplicity and timelessness, it took a long time to get rid of that. And the modal collapse, even when I articulated when I wrote the first paper that I did on it, I still didn't realize what I'd gotten into. I was still kind of thinking maybe there's a way to make sense of simplicity somehow. And then eventually I was just like, I can just find too many problems and no solutions to the problems. This is just too many problems.
I'm with you. Yeah. Kid trying to call me, and I'm using my phone for a camera tonight.
Right. That's wrong.
Yeah, it's and now she's texting me. So that's the great things about having kids. Hey, Miss Amber Croom in the chat, could you tell your kid to stop calling me, please? I'm trying to have a show. So, what exactly? I don't even know if I understand what impassibility is. What is meant by impassibility as you understand it?
So it's got three big claims. The first one is that God cannot suffer. It is impossible for God to suffer. And that's the most common claim you'll see associated with it. But I wrote this paper called "Why Can't the Impassible God Suffer?" Because it's just like, why like, what's up with that? And so that's when I discovered impassibility actually makes two further claims. So the second claim is God cannot be moved or influenced or caused by anything outside of himself. And that still doesn't quite explain why God cannot suffer, because maybe God's just in a state of eternal suffering, just because. And so, but the third reason, the third claim with divine impassibility is what starts to explain why God cannot suffer. And so the third claim is that God cannot have any emotion that is irrational, immoral, or inconsistent with God's perfect happiness. And so that's what's really doing all the work here, is God is in a state of pure, undisturbed happiness. And since God can't be influenced by anything outside of himself, well, then nothing's going to get God out of that state of happiness. So that's why God cannot suffer. So just imagine God just being perfectly happy, and you're like, why are you happy? And he's like, because I'm awesome. I'm happy about my own awesomeness. And that's it. I mean, that really is, that is quite literally the story. Yeah.
Yeah, that's about, I think you explained it very well, because every time I've asked about, impassibility, I get, we got to go around 3 blocks before we come back around to what it exactly is. So I think you did a pretty good job, and I'm with you. I think
a lot of theologians want to build in the entire doctrine of God when they want to talk about any attribute whatsoever, and that's why you're going around 3 blocks before you ever get to the point. And I'm constantly, I hate reading this stuff because I'm like, you're talking about every other doctrine other than what this paper is supposed to be about. Can you get to impassibility or get to whatever it is? But yeah, that's his impassibility. And so the story quite literally is like Holocaust is happening, and God's like, but I'm happy because I'm awesome. And you're like, whew,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a harsh view.
So Catholic traditionalist wants to know if you and I are atheists. I'm sure he's been accused of it a few times. I've been accused of it a few times, for sure.
I remember the first time I got accused of it was, I was at the University of Cambridge. I was teaching there for a year, and I got asked to present on divine simplicity. And so I give some argument against it. And somebody in the audience asked a question, and I was like, I don't understand your question. And so he tried to probe a little bit further, and his question still made no sense. And then eventually he just said, well, you're just an atheist. And I was like, I don't know how we got here, but the moderator was mortified by this and just was like, let's move on to the next question, and just moved on quickly to the next thing. And I was like, what was that? I don't know where this came from.
That's crazy. I'm an atheist to 99 gods, but not yours.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, or not mine, Yeah, that's, I think if I ever hear that again, I'm going to lose it. I actually recently kind of admitted to, my position right now is an agnostic Christian. And the reason being is I've done, now I don't doubt Christ. I don't doubt the resurrection, what that meant, who Christ was. I am thoroughly convinced in Christianity. On the other side, I am thoroughly convinced in at least a deistic God. The metaphysical arguments for God to me are very powerful. I'm one of those who really does lean on the argumentation, the rationality, because I don't have all the feelings that a lot of evangelicals talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so my trouble right now is the more that I study Jewish theology and Jewish metaphysics, is trying to, without, if I was to just not accept the church as being basically directed by God as, his church for progressive revelation. And if I set that aside, I don't know how in the world we come up with the Trinity. I mean, I do understand the biblical case for it. I understand the eternal expression of love. I think it makes sense with a Trinity or a Trinitarian God to have an eternal expression of love. Those are still there. It's just the issue of trying to solve the paradoxes, and the incarnation of Christ and things. I'm just, at this point, I'm like, I don't even know. I don't know. I would like to say that I am, but I'm not truly convinced at this point. I know God has, or Christ has, some type of divine relationship with God. How that works, I don't know. So
It's a lot to think
maybe I ought to
through.
read some more of your stuff.
Gosh, I mean, I've written on the Trinity and the Incarnation quite a bit, and it's so difficult for me to popularize that stuff. So I've been on the Muslim Metaphysician show a few times now, and I like with Jake, and talking. I've talked about like the Incarnation and the metaphysics of the Incarnation and the Trinity, and I'm always so impressed that people can follow that, because I'm like, there's a lot of topics where I'm like, I can make God and time really simple, and nobody else can, but I'm like, I can do that. Yeah. And then I'm like, when it comes to the Trinity, I'm like, I don't have the confidence that I can make that simple. And then people tell me they can follow the arguments. I'm like, that's good, because I look at them and I go, can I follow my own arguments? Oof, I don't know. It's complicated so fast.
I have that sometimes. I'll explain something and somebody's like, oh, okay, I see. And I'm like, I don't know if I see. I'm glad you can see. The more I talked about it, the less confident I was in what I said.
Yeah.
So does your wife love cooking Italian food or refuse to cook Italian food?
She loves cooking Italian food. And I've learned how to make a few things. Like we make ravioli every Christmas. It's a big thing her family always did. So we do that every Christmas. Yes. And I've learned other things not to do. So never snap the pasta in half before you throw it into the pot. Like that's the worst thing you could possibly do. Yeah. That's where it's sort of you're making my grandmother cry. She's rolling over in her grave, and I'm just like,
oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. Well, but you only get like half the noodles a week, and then you got to wait for them to get limp and the rest of it to fall in.
Exactly. Because I'm like, you snap it in half, you get it in there right away, but then instantly you're like, spiacente. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to spit on your grandmother's recipe of how to do this. It's a deep insult to.
We fired up the evil one. That's an inside joke. She sent me a comedian who was talking about his wife being the evil one. It was hilarious, and I mean, he described my wife to a T. It was. They were wanting to catch baseballs behind home plate. It was the first time they got to have home plate, or have home plate seats. And she's like, why do you want the balls? Why do you want the balls? You pay all that money to come here. And he's like, well, if they were throwing Louis Vuitton bags over it, there'd be a whole bunch of dead bees in here. I swerved listening to it. I was like, oh my God. And then it'd be $3,000 a ticket. And I'm like, wow, that is such my wife. Oh, Captain Evil. I'm
Captain
sorry.
Evil. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, I've noticed with Italian wives, so it's either they refuse to ever cook it or they love cooking it. But the ravioli, her grandfather would spend all day cooking dinner, and it would be hand-stuffed ravioli, and it was unbelievable. It was so phenomenal. Now, you didn't get in the man's way. You might get broken legs.
Right.
The kitchen was his kingdom, and you didn't go in there, or you left him alone. But yeah, I feel you on the ravioli. People think of like Chef Boyardee, and I'm like, no. This is some good stuff.
Because I would have thought Chef Boyardee at one point, but now that I've seen like the real stuff, and I'm like, you can't go back. You just can't. It's one of those things where like it's ruined you for anything else.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, absolutely. If I find an Italian restaurant that has good handmade ravioli, I'm like, you want to go there? You want to go there? No, I'm tired. It's usually Mexican for me. I'm a huge Mexican food guy. So I think my family's like burnt out on Mexican food, but oh well.
You're like, maybe guys, you should just get some taste, because I know what's up.
Yeah, exactly. You should listen to me. That's at those times it would be good to be a fundamentalist. I am head of this household, and we are going to eat Mexican food. Yeah, that's a good way. I think I might still have the bump on my head. No. So, are you a tiramisu guy?
I do like a good tiramisu every now and then, which is weird because I don't like coffee at all. I really hate coffee. But like tiramisu, like which has got sometimes has coffee in it, I'm like, okay, I can get that every now and then.
Okay, yeah. Nice. Well, so Catholic traditionalist just gave us a whole list of people that I should invite on the show.
All right.
And he added Darth Dawkins in there, and I don't think I had the patience for that, man.
There's a few people on the list that I would not have the patience for. I've been on the Canadian Catholic show. I went on that show. That was
did you? What? Oh, it turned into a dumpster fire?
There was a lot of questions that were asked, and then I didn't quite get to answer them before we got asked the next question. So it was very quick fire, and I was just like, okay, cool. I didn't know what I was getting into, and that was one of the moments where like somebody caught me on a day where I was really bored, and I was like, yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah, sure, let's do it. I mean, PhD, SMEHD.
I was like, I'm writing some stuff, and I don't know, I'm bored. I like because like I've been living in Finland this whole last year, and so my wife was still in Scotland at the time. And so there's a lot of times I was just by myself, and so I was like really bored. I was like, yeah, everybody's like invite me to do stuff. I'm like, yeah, what else am I going to be doing? I don't know.
So you're finished with that?
I've got 1 year left in Finland, so I'm going to be at the end of this month. I'm going back to Helsinki, and so I'm going to be back and forth between. Joke. Oh man! Oh, it's so on the nose too. I don't
with that.
I think
I'm the worst.
Here's what it is. Okay, so like there's all these Finnish jokes, but like okay, so my little sister, she still cannot get in her head that Helsinki is a real place. She thinks I'm cussing every time I say it, and so it bothers her every time I say the word Helsinki. and so all the other Finnish jokes that are so obvious, like I can't get the just saying the word Helsinki has enough comedic value for me because I can just say that. Or like this one time I was coming back from my office and I'm on they have like a trolley system in the city, and so I'm just sitting there and talking to on the phone with my sister, and on the overhead speaker like the woman's like saying the name of the street, and the street is like Helsinki Street in English, but so she's just like like you're now approaching Helsinki and Katsu, and my sister's like, did she just say Helsinki again? I'm like, it's the name of the street. And she's like, that can't be. And I'm like, it's the name of the city. Like, what do you want? And she's like, yeah, I can't stand this. And I was like, fine, I'll say it in Swedish for you to sound better. And she's like, okay, what's it in Swedish? And I'm like, in Swedish, it's Helsinkin. And she's like, oh, it still has hell in it. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you.
It's like, Ryan, you're going to Helsinki.
Exactly. Yeah. We had a million jokes like that in my family.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. What's it like living abroad in so many different countries? How are you? Are you welcomed, or because I was talking to Dustin Crummett? Yeah, mm-hmm. I was, and Dr. Crummett was in Germany, and he.
Oh, that's right. I forget he was in Germany for a while. Yeah,
he seemed to have loved it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. He had a good time in Germany. I met Dustin. We overlapped at Notre Dame for a year. He was a PhD student when I was doing a postdoc there. But yeah, so I've lived in Scotland on and off for about 10 years. I had a year in England, and then I've had 1 year in Finland, and then I'm about to go back. And I've been in a lot of other countries for different amounts of time. Most places like I've been like welcomed like almost immediately, which is really nice. Finland is more American than the rest of Europe, which is really weird. And I don't know how to put my finger on exactly why that is the case. Their English is a lot more American. So I had to stop using a lot of British phrases, which was really hard because I had been living in the UK for so long. I had forgotten which were English and which were American phrases. And so I get there and I try to order a whiskey, and they can't understand me because I've got this fake British accent I'm doing. And I'm like structuring my sentences in this British way. And they're just like, what do you want? And I'm like, I would like a Glenfiddich. And they're like, well, what? And I'm like, a Glen. And then I have to eventually point to the Glenfiddich on there. And they're like, oh, you'd like a Glen. And they say it in this other way that I'm like, nobody says Glenfiddich that way, but okay, fine. That's, just give me the whiskey. Like,
give me a Glenfiddich, you bloody fool.
Yeah. So yeah. but the Finns are great. Yeah, they're good.
Yeah, this is a good compliment here, Dr. Mullins.
Oh, okay.
Tim. So you changed his perspective.
I've had a lot of Muslims tell me this, and I find this really fascinating because I've had some interaction with some different Muslim thinkers over the years, and they've really been very complimentary of my work, which I greatly appreciate. And then the time stuff, though, that's the stuff that really shocked me, because most of the Muslim tradition is affirming that God is timeless. There are a couple hadiths that some people pointed out to me where they say that like Allah is time, and so some people have so Jake from the Muslim Metaphysician Show was the first person to point this out to me. And I'm like, okay, so there seems like there's some interesting work to be done there, but I just haven't been able to explore it enough yet. So I'm really curious to see where this goes.
Yeah, I really like Jake. I mean, he loves to spend a lot of time on the Trinity and Incarnation, but other than that, he's a pretty smart guy. Yeah. I watched his debate with James White. And
I did not watch that one, but I saw some of the aftermath, and then he asked me to weigh in on some social media stuff.
Yeah, I didn't get to finish the whole thing, but from what I saw, it was a very good conversation.
Good.
And yeah, so, for what it's worth. So what is it? Amaya Slave controversy? Is God's name God himself?
Okay, I think it's just referring to divine simplicity. I'm not entirely certain though exactly the question.
Yeah, I'm not either. That's the only reason I put it up there. I was like, is that something you've heard of? That's not something I've heard of.
No, because when it comes to especially a lot of stuff with Judaism and Islam, I'm still very much an amateur. At some of these other religions, I'm starting to dig into them a lot more deeply. But yeah, so that's. If they've got a follow-up question to explain it a bit more, I'm happy to hear it, but I don't quite understand it yet.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I was kind of hoping you did, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
So, well, I told you I'd keep you about an hour, and I have kept you for 2 hours and 30 minutes waiting. So I do appreciate you coming on for sure. I'm very thankful that you come on here. I'm very humbled, and thank you so much for your patience.
Yeah, no problem.
So where can people find you? Do you have social media you do yourself? I looked to see if you had a YouTube channel or something, and I couldn't.
I do, but I'm not because I don't do my own videos. So all I have really is just a playlist of all the shows that I'm on. The main way to find me is if you go to rtmullins.com, and I've got the podcast, I've got all the videos, I've got links to a bunch of my papers there. And I've also got a page there for the book series that John Peckham and I are doing on the Doctrine of God. And then soon my wife and I are going to create another web page of just translations of my work, because I've had some of my work's been translated into Spanish, some of it into Turkish and Persian. Some people have done I think somebody might have done a Portuguese at some point as well. So different people have been working on different translations of my work, and so really honored by that. So I've been telling everybody, if you do a translation of my work, put your name on the translation when you send it to me, and then at some points in the near future, we're going to put that on the website. And then I'm working with some people in Peru at the moment to do a book on God, Scripture, and Emotion that's going to be translated into Spanish as well. So I'm trying to do a lot of work on that. Yeah. Other than that, people can find The Reluctant Theologian. It's on most podcast platforms. And then I'm on Twitter and then on Facebook.
Okay. Awesome. I really, really enjoy your work. I love watching the videos that you do. The fact you spend so much time on YouTube with all these discussions, it is so helpful for people like me who is an audio-visual learner, and I just want to say thank you for your contribution and all that you do, doing God's work, and brilliant mind. And I don't mean that in a flattery way. I think that you have a very special gift for being able to break down a lot of these technical things in philosophy to a layman's level for dum-dums like me to pick up on. So
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to bounce you out and tell everybody good night. If you have to go, that's cool. If not, I will see you in the backstage.
Cool.
There you go. Dr. Ryan Mullins. He's one of my favorites. Him and Joe Schmidt and all these young guys that are just, man, I don't know. I wish that I would have got into all this when I was younger so I could be like half of Dr. Mullins. And I don't mean like height-wise because I'm 5'7". I don't know how tall he is, but I'm probably half his height anyway. It seems like everybody that's brilliant's taller than me too. Ugh. But anyway, all of his info is in the description. I've got a link to his website, his books. Check it out. I'm telling you, you will not regret it. I've seen a lot of explanations of his books. I've seen summaries and articles and him talk about it, and it's been phenomenal. It's definitely, especially his stuff on classical theism, his neoclassical theism, because I actually line up a lot more with him at this point than Dr. Namesh, but I like Steve, so maybe he can convince me one day. As usual, all of the logos, all the artwork, the introduction, everything is done by Pasta Mike at Pasta Mike Productions with Normalizing Atheism. Check him out on YouTube. He has his own channel there. He has his own group on Facebook. Join the group. You may get to talk to people like me. You may not. You may get to actually talk to him yourself. He's a legend. But thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for your patience. I'm sorry that the show was late. Work and, life happens, and life can be difficult sometimes. So have a good evening, everybody, and I'll see you later.